Ophir, it's really great to have you here. We're actually here at the Catalyst Fast Tracking Your Future event in central London. It's a really exciting place. There's lots of buzzing things going on. Can you give the guys a little bit of an intro to yourself?
Yeah, great to be here. Thank you for having me. So my name is Ophir Tanz. I'm the CEO and founder of Pearl. We're probably best known for the work that we do in radiologic AI, although our product set has expanded fairly considerably as well. I have a background in engineering. I've been working in the computer vision space for upwards of 20 years now. So most of what I've done in my career has been in applied computer vision. That capability obviously has become much more powerful, the last 10 or 15 years, which has been great because it's enabled a lot of additional use cases that wouldn't have been possible previous to that.
Amazing. So, I mean, you spoke about Pearl, and obviously that's your most recent endeavor. So we'll start with that. Like, people that don't know that story, where did it all begin? Why did you choose dental? Why AI? How did it all come together?
Yeah, I think actually much more naturally than it seems on the surface. So I ran a company prior to Pearl for 11 years called Gum Gum, which ironically was not in the dental space.
Yeah.
But it was also a computer vision oriented enterprise in the media and advertising space. And what Gum Gum focused on was really looking at all the imagery, video, and text on the web and contextualizing it so that you can sort of target particular environments in a much more comprehensive way. We also did a lot of work on the brand safety side so we can make sure that pages were sort of safe. Prior to Gum Gum, all of the imagery and video was really sort of just like a black box. So you never really knew what was there, and everything was contextual via the semantic text review. And that's really what we focused on. So we ended up building, $1 billion plus company, sort of doing that kind of work. And while at Gum Gum, as we started to do better and became profitable, I started to incubate other computer vision oriented applications within the organization. One of my long-term interests in this space was applying this capability to radiography. Now it turns out my father is a dentist. So a lot of people think that that's why I fell into doing this kind of work, particularly at Pearl, and it definitely has something to do with it. But we actually did do a fairly comprehensive review of various fields of medicine to understand where we could generate the most value if we were to develop a capability to identify disease in radiography. And for a number of reasons, I'm happy to go into if you'd like, landed on dentistry. I obviously also grew up in that environment and was very familiar with it, so it was personally interesting to me. And we also incubated other businesses. Now, in 2019, I made the determination that we should probably spin out these enterprises into their own companies, let the core company get all of its profit back, and let that company focus on going public. So I made the decision at the time and presented it to the board to spin everything out and raise my hand to go with Pearl, which was at the time called Gum Gum Dental, because I was just incredibly interested and passionate about the space. So that's sort of the origin story of how this all happened. And in May of 2019, we spun out and became Pearl.
Amazing. I mean, yeah, you spoke about how we see, visual, AI representation in various radiological settings. Obviously, I say this on the podcast all the time and get called out for it. I came from a hospital background, so I have seen it in different use cases, like on chest X-rays for one. Various different areas of the chest and lungs and heart.
You saw AI at work in those modalities?
Yeah, so AI was working sort of really hard in those spaces quite early on, and for an NHS in particular that's really behind in various different ways, it was quite cool to see AI so early on there. And I kind of wonder, like, you said we can go into some of those reasons why you chose dental. Like, what's like the top reason? What's the one thing that made it so exciting?
I think the top reason just being very simplistic about it, is that there's just more dental radiography captured every day than any other form of radiography by far.
Yeah.
That inherently indicates that there's probably a lot of utility
Yeah.
in enabling people to read that radiography more proficiently, and also in communicating to patients. But there's a lot of other reasons as well. I think, first of all, access to data is obviously a big one. I really like the fact that dentistry, by its nature, is a very entrepreneurial industry where people can make autonomous decisions and move quickly. And you contrast that with, say, hospital systems where it might take, 5, 6, 7 years to get into a particular sort of group, and it's just a very different kind of play. And we also looked at a lot of data around diagnostic proficiency, and it just seemed like this was a category that could really use assistance. Dentists are so burdened with so much responsibility. They're not going to school as radiologists to learn how to do this one thing really well for years on end. They're learning how to be complete dentists, and they get thrown into the world, and they have to now also, if they own a practice, like run a business, communicate with patients, issue treatment, do marketing. This is kind of just one step in the patient journey that needs to occur. And if it doesn't occur well, then you don't actually get a good outcome. And what I also really liked about this, is just a final point, is that we're really here to help an unburdened dentist by providing a second opinion and an aid. And we're not threatening their core livelihood. And as you know, in other forms of medicine where, folks do this solely, it's very threatening to them to have a technology like this that they feel could displace them. And I would very much like that we were looked upon as a helpful hand, an aiding hand, versus something more nefarious.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And you touched on that entrepreneurial spirit of dentists as well. And you touched on the fact that, in other industries, they can't go as quick as dental. I think we have that misconception, especially in dental, that we're massively behind. Like cloud is a new thing, and it really shouldn't be. And, imaging is like miles behind, and the quality of our images are bad. But we focus on that and forget about how far we've come. And, I've mentioned that it was unreal to me that in the NHS we had AI in certain X-rays, but actually we didn't have barcode scanning.
Mm-hmm.
And
Yeah.
think about that's really truly being behind. So
I feel like the industry is very hard on itself.
absolutely. Yeah.
And there's merit to it, for sure. It is, just historically been separated from traditional medicine, which is, in my opinion, very silly.
Yeah.
But at the same time, I think that if you look at the pace of innovation in the space and the pace of adoption and interest in new technologies, like I don't look down on it so much. Like I think it's actually a pretty vibrant environment. I think that part of the challenge, and something that your organization is playing a heavy role in, probably the biggest role globally, is that you don't have standardization. And there's a lot of legacy infrastructure and legacy software. And that makes doing interesting work at scale easily very challenging. So if you look at startups or enterprises that are trying to do innovative work in the space, you could see a lot of them get stuck on the hill of just like the ingestion and normalization of data, which in and of itself doesn't have a lot of enterprise value. But if you can't solve it, you can't really solve the hard problems. And you see a lot of entities that kind of die on that hill. And I think as things become more modernized, cloud-based, accessible, ideally open architectures, then there will be an ability to move more quickly.
Yeah, absolutely. And, we see that all the time. As you said, we've got people, a lot of people on Exact. We've got fewer people moving to Dentally, and that is ramping up over time. But we're not the only on-prem solution out there, and there's lots of history in those on-prem solutions. And and a lot of people wedded to it. So yeah, absolutely. We until we sort of see that traction, we won't see the movement. But where we're seeing that traction is where we're seeing the most movement.
And another interesting point. Sorry, I think you're still on question one here, so
No, it's
I'll
absolutely
stop
fine.
talking so
This
much.
is better conversation than
A
I have.
very interesting observation that I've had is that the critical software in the industry, primarily the PMS, which is kind of the beating heart of a practice, but also imaging, is been built or bought or owned by companies that are not inherently software enterprises. They either do hardware or they do distribution. And now you're seeing a lot of movement to make these companies or insert a lot of software-oriented DNA into these enterprises. But I think that's just very unique in that, like, the valuable software that's become only more valuable over time was sort of built and owned ultimately by, at their core, not non-software entities. So I think we're in the midst of that transformation now.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, in the case of Henry Schein 1, you've got the coming together Exact and Dentally. Exact coming from, a very software focused background with Brian Weatherly, but, actually having that Henry Schein backing, and then Dentally coming from Nick and James, the co-founders. That's like garage entrepreneurialism, like it's sat there coding, bring it all together. So we kind of got the best of both worlds, but it's really
which
nice
is why what Henry Schein in general, I think, has been so impressive in this regard, because building Henry Schein 1, understanding that it makes sense to have a sort of separate enterprise that is solely focused on doing this one thing, like software well, and not constantly be hampered and held back by the mothership, was very clever. And also, obviously, the acquisition strategy, I think, has been quite smart and successful.
Absolutely. Thank you. I mean, let's talk a bit more about Pearl then. So, I mean, you're doing things now that we'd have thought was impossible 5 years ago. And like, literally in 2019, you were thinking it was possible. But in this whole piece, what was like your proudest breakthrough? What was the moment you were like, we've cracked this?
Yeah. Well, the bar keeps moving, right? So, with all startups, you go from a position of like having this idea, having a lot of excitement, and then just doing tons of work to try and make that thing a reality before you run out of money and die. So it's like you're in survival mode, kind of, right? And when you find your way out of that wilderness, then that's a certain type of gratification, because now you're fighting for growth and opportunity and not survival. So I would call that, say, with 2D radiographic modalities, you have to build capabilities, get them regulatorily cleared so that you can actually commercialize a product. That's a very binary outcome, because if you don't get, say, FDA clearance, you really can't do it much with our type of work. So that was a very happy day. We were the first company to receive comprehensive FDA clearance and pathology clearance for pathologies in the world. So that was a very proud moment, and also a big relief because we put so much money and time into it up to that period of time.
Yeah.
But the milestones and even the nature of the mission on some level expands and changes over time. So there's always another gratifying moment that you're aiming for, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I suppose as well, with that movement of going from, one piece of software, to other areas, but also improving that piece of software.
Yeah.
Like, do you ever see a world where, Pearl as we know it now is just standard and not an add-on? Or do you see it as always innovating to a point where it adds on to what we have?
It's a really good question. I do feel that it will effectively be standard, in that I don't think if you fast forward 5, or maybe if you're being more generous, 10 years, anybody's going to be practicing dentistry without the assistance of this technology radiographically. It just seems impossible. It's becoming a standard of care. I think, though, people often make a mistake by looking at this technology as a single standalone capability. And I think that it's really the incorrect way to think about it. I think about it more so like a keystone technology on which you can build an entire infrastructure. So a lot of folks say, over time will this become commoditized? And I don't think so. I think there could be 100 more things like exactly like what we do, but if you don't have um, the regulatory clearances, the global infrastructure, the integrations, but then the entire um, picket fence of capabilities surrounding it, then you're just kind of uh, missing the point on some level. So the work that we do now is like so far beyond the core radiologic AI, but it requires it in order to function, that I think it's just getting interwoven into, in a very fun way, into all aspects of the practice. So yeah, I think it'll be effectively standard one way or another.
Yeah.
I also think it's so ROI positive that I think that the industry is going to move into a new mode of thinking about software. I think we're going to play a role there. I think you guys are going to play a role there as well. In that historically it's been, I only want to spend X, and there's been a lot of focus on potential sort of cost savings there. But when you come into an environment with a set of cognitive capabilities and you return massive time, massive value, and ultimately massive production to a practice, the calculus starts to become very different in terms of how and where you want to spend your capital on that business. So we're much more focused on getting our partners into a production mindset, because the reality is, even with our core capability, we surface 37% more disease on average. We drive case acceptance stuff over 30%. If you just do those two things, you're already doing much better dentistry. And I would argue it's much better for the patient as well, because you're able to catch things earlier and be much more preventative in nature. So I think we're going to undergo a mind shift. So for example, if you're able to return, 25 hours a week to a practice, like what does that mean in terms of time? If you were historically doing something manually, call it, the combination of odonogram charting or in clinical notes and billing, like there's all this stuff that will get automated away. There's a lot of inherent value to not doing it that way. So will it be standard? Like, yes, effectively, but exactly how that comes to be formed is an open question.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think you're absolutely right. It's like what do they do with that time? What does that mean? How does that look? Even down to I've saved an hour, I can see another 4
Yeah,
patients. That's huge in itself. Um, no, I definitely agree with like changing the mindset of how we see these systems. They're not add-ons, they're outcomes, and
right.
we're even down to silly things, right? So in our world, we have SMS. Say SMS is 10p. It's different for different people. To say it's 10p per text, or we've got letters. Say it's 50p a text. We have seen like average places get 2000% ROI.
Yeah,
So if not more, on all of their text spend or all on their letter spend. Now, if you're looking at that as I spend £200 a month on SMS, you're looking at it the wrong way.
exactly.
Yeah.
And especially increasingly, we're able to really prove outcomes quantitatively. So that's part of the job of the organization, is to help you understand your business and the kind of impact that different technologies are having on it fundamentally, right?
Absolutely. Yeah. So we're talking about this sort of like adoption and the speed of adoption. You obviously work across multiple different territories. Which country would you say has adopted it fastest, and why do you reckon that is?
Yeah, we're technically regulatory located in 120 countries. We don't operate in 120 countries. We're focused on probably 6 or 7 key territories that obviously include the US, Canada, the UK, many different parts of Europe like the Netherlands and Germany, and Australia, Saudi, the UAE. We do a fair bit of work in as well. The list goes on. I would say that probably not surprisingly, the US has been the most aggressive adopter of this technology. But we've seen in my opinion, fairly healthy adoption in all the markets in which we operate. Often the challenges are around the nature of the legacy software that we're interacting with. What we find is if you can't create a really great seamless user experience, then there's just going to create a barrier to adoption and success. This is why the kind of work that we do together is, super exciting and compelling. And I think we generally, by and large, produce very, very happy users. For the numbers, very few leave, if any, right? So you need to sort that out at the level of the territory, and every one of these countries has a different software infrastructure reality. So I think all these markets are on track for full adoption. People often say like, is it frustrating that people aren't adopting more quickly? I think people are adopting it like plenty quickly.
Yeah.
And it will clearly become a standard of care in the relative near term. Like I think we've actually gone from a place of really seeing like we're focused on early adopters and we're on that point of the curve, but now we're in the mass adoption cycle and it's happening quite quickly.
Yeah, absolutely. I think I could have expected it was the US on stuff like this. And not only are they innovators, but also the system works for sort of proving ROI, right? It's very business oriented. And
the key companies have been based there that do this kind of work as well. So that makes a big difference. You focus on your home market first, typically.
Yeah, exactly that. Exactly that. So we talked about like you already talked about the biggest differences in or the biggest regulatory and cultural barriers in different countries, but what are the differences in trust levels? Like, do you get the same sentiment everywhere? Like, or does a different country have something slightly different?
No, totally different. Yeah, as you might imagine. There's just the cultural realities, other cultural realities on the ground, and they're quite different. In America, I think, there's a lot of interest in technology to drive efficiency and things like production. And it's also okay to talk about that fairly openly. Like, this is a form of medicine. I think in a lot of parts of Europe, nobody wants to talk about production explicitly because it's kind of icky. And I understand that as well, but it is a cultural difference in that the way that you talk about the technology is much more sort of clinical in nature, and eventually down the line, everyone's kind of curious about this thing, but you kind of talk about it a little bit later on in the conversation. I also think that certain markets are like Germany, for example, it's very slow, very methodical, very intentional, and very clinically and scientifically rigorous. And once you can generate the requisite amount of trust in market, then you really see things kind of open up and move in a way that I would say is less cavalier. Like in the US, you might say, I'm going to try this thing, and if I don't like it, I'm going to cancel it, So yeah, I would say that every market presents its own sort of, cultural norms and realities. And that's why we find that it's important to actually put folks on the ground that speak the local language, that live in the country, and that really understand the dynamics and mindset of particular markets.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, obviously we operate in lots of different countries, and I know for a fact that the language and messaging that I'd have to use in Canada is so different to what I'd have to use in Australia.
Yes.
And whilst I might see similarities, they're both countries that, like it to the point. They don't like any BS.
Yeah.
They take that in two different ways. So absolutely, I can take that on board. What about patients though? So we've talked a lot about our customers, people that are buying this product or like investing in this product. But how do you feel sort of patients either in different territories or in general are looking at this? Do you think it helps improve our conversations with them, or do you see any level of skepticism?
Look, I think this is an amazing technology, and my career has been marked largely by computer vision. And the fun thing about computer vision is it's visual. Everyone likes pictures.
Yeah.
When you take something as amorphous and inherently confusing as a dental radiograph, that is effectively a bunch of gray smudges if you're don't have a trained eye. Then, I mean, it's kind of funny if you think of the history of, clinicians communicating to patients. It's like millions of conversations where one side clearly doesn't know what the hell they're talking about ever
Yeah.
for decades, right? It's just insane. It's comedic.
Yeah.
I think for the first time in history, you now have the ability to segment out the oral anatomy, could identify all of the tooth parts. You can see how the disease interacts with those tooth parts. Because as you know, if you're identifying periapical radiolucencies or decay, I mean, it's very slight. I mean, and it's hard to sort of to see with the naked eye. Now, dentists obviously trained at this and do it well, but we colorize this whole thing and make a very productive, clear conversation possible. The case presentation and ability to communicate clearly with the patient is so valuable. And we've run an innumerable number of surveys, including one this week that I got a bunch of results for from a DSO that on its own ran a study across asking its patients what their experience was with the AI. I could share those with you, by the way. I think you'd find them interesting. Overwhelmingly positive.
Amazing. Yeah, I mean, we're seeing that more than ever. I was in a practice yesterday with Sophie from Pearl, and they were asking us, "Can I have a plaque in my front office because I need people to know that I've got Pearl?" And it's like it's a genuine excitement that their patients are excited about. And you say, like, you know, patients see a greyish blob and dentists are trained to know what a greyish blob is. Again, at this event that we're at now, I was just speaking to dentists who were saying, I rely on Pearl when I get to, you know, that 8th appointment of the day and I'm starting to get a bit tired. Actually, I'm going to be only looking at the big scary caries and I'm missing everything else.
Yeah.
And
you're very myopically focused, say, on restorative, and then you miss a whole other class of problem. It's a very hard job to be a dentist. It's super busy. You're seeing lots of patients. And you have a lot of things to be concerned about. So this unburdening element, I think, is important. It is called second opinion. We are obviously leaving the dentist in charge, inherently the treatment philosophies will vary, and there's even some subjectivity with diagnostic reads, right? So I think it's incredibly accurate and reliable, but at the same time, we very much want to keep the dentist always in the driver's seat, and I think by and large that's how it's manifested.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's one of those things like that you never have a dentist who misses the big massive lesion, but they do miss the incipient lesions, or they might just be not so focused on lesions they're missing bone loss and just silly things like that. So I definitely think the software helps in that regard. But thinking about all of those different things that Pearl now does, and people look at it and go, "Oh, that's the carie system." It's not just the carie system; it has so many other features. How do you keep innovating this solution without overwhelming the solution as being too much?
Yeah, I think it's a good question because we're building a lot of technology. But I think the answer to that, and I don't know if you saw, we recently got cleared in the past couple of weeks for CBCT and 3D modalities as well. So that's a whole new world of opportunity to add value in a similar way, but with some quite unique use cases in the 3D realm. I think if you are solving a genuinely frustrating, hard problem, you probably can't do too much of that. And yeah, if you come to a user in one day with 7 great solutions, it's probably going to be too overwhelming for them to want to adopt all of them on day one because they want to focus on getting each one right. So there will be an adoption curve to that. But I think it's about solving real problems. Like, everyone hates perio probing and charting and all this. So like if you can solve that problem, that's a big deal.
Yeah.
And I can go sort of on and on. So I think the utility that you are providing makes it possible to also provide a large quantum of it.
Yeah.
I think if you're not doing that, then it could just be a little silly and overwhelming. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. I think that the pace that Pearl's going at is fantastic, and I think there's not too much that can be done right now. And whoever told you to do CBCT, and maybe it was yourself, biggest thing I get asked at events. So it's really cool that's on its way.
Yeah.
So let's just talk a little couple questions about yourself, your team, and sort of how you approach running businesses. Because, as you said, very entrepreneurial market. Lots of dentists watching this will have their own teams. Um, how do you personally stay curious in, this world of innovation that you live in, and how do you instill that kind of into your team?
Yeah. I love this company and the nature of the work that we do, and I think I love it because I love the just as an engineer the technical challenge it presents in and of itself, but I also love that we're touching real lives in a very tangible way and just making things better. Um, and I also think that we're going to really dramatically improve the oral health, or at least have a hand in it fundamentally, of billions of lives globally. Um, we try to bring people onto the team that are curious, but also passionate about solving problems. Um, Pearl is, a little over 200 people now, but we're still, a startup. And um, I think we're very clear with people coming into the company about sort of how mission oriented we are, and also how much work it's likely going to be. Like it is a very busy, busy place. Um, and we try to be very deliberate about sort of bringing on folks that are wanting that in their lives. But look, I think early on in a startup, and we're maybe starting to exit this phase, like the mission is so felt and so much at the surface that like you don't need to do a lot of work around culture because everyone just like wants to solve the problem together, and it's very invigorating. Um, in my experience, once you get to 300 people or so, that's when culture starts changing, and you'd be much more deliberate about communicating the company values and instilling them and representing them by example. Um, but we have this notion at Pearl where we talk about just sort of like capable hands. Like what we want more than anything is to be able to give people tricky, hard problems, technical or otherwise, and know that they're going to usher them to a solution or at least communicate really well around sort of the status of that thing, but be able to kind of turn away and go do the next thing because this person's managing it. And I think that's a really healthy way to think about building an organization is like you just want as many capable hands, reliable, trustworthy hands around you as possible that will not drop a ball.
Yeah.
So
And so you have that sort of internal entrepreneurial spirit where, people are trying to solve problems that you hadn't even thought of yet. And actually the product and the company grows because of the actions of the people.
yeah, we say customer success and product development is the job of everybody at the company. Our job is to, drive lots of customer delight, solve customers' problems, solve our partners' problems, but also think critically about where we could add the most value. And I think a healthy organization that's coming from every level of the organization.
Amazing. And, I could have asked you, and I normally ask this of other people who are sort of invested in the area, but not necessarily experts in the area. Fast forward 5 years, what does this all look like? I'm going to change the question for you, I think, after our conversation today is what should people be investing, not their money, but their time in the next 5 years?
People generally?
Just, well, you can do people generally, but people in this industry.
Well, look, I'm very biased, obviously, but I do think that investing time in infusing artificial intelligence into your entire reality and into your practice will be the most profound thing that you can do as an individual and as an organization. I don't think that's only the case in dentistry. I think that's the case at this point societally. We're at a very profound moment in human history where you have a new form of intelligence, a cognitive ability that can see, that can think, that can hear, that can reason. It's wild. I think we all sort of interact with ChatGPT or other agents and have our minds blown all the time, just by how fast and how high quality the results are. So in my opinion, what's going to happen in dentistry, I think in the near term, this is actually what my talk today is about, in large part, is like, what do the next 2 or 3 years look like? And what they look like is very significant automation of tasks that historically have been very manual and required some level of cognitive awareness and thinking, right? I think it's just a new realm, a new normal. I think it's going to be profoundly good for the field of dentistry because people are going to be able to focus on patient communication, empathy, actually issuing great treatments, like on the things that matter more than anything else. So maybe not surprising, I would say, focus on AI in all its forms and figure out how to productively infuse that into your enterprise, but it's an always on thing. Like even us, a very AI forward company who's sort of up to date on the latest and greatest capabilities, we're constantly experimenting and trying to figure out how to leverage AI to maximum effect in all of our departments. And it's becoming more advanced so quickly that like that story changes all the time. So you need to really be a student, I think, of this technology and ultimately a partner of it.
Amazing. That's good advice. Now, on that same note,
Yeah.
I've prepped you for this, but I normally give people a minute, 30 seconds, whatever it is, to give a message out to the audience. So whether that's promoting something or giving a plea, whatever it may be for you. So I'll give you the floor. What would you like to? What message?
I feel like that was my plea that
I know it did feel like.
So the thing I'll promote, we're doing a lot of really exciting work with Henry Schein. You guys are terrific partners, and I think we've created some very high quality workflows together, specifically in dentally. So I'd recommend people look at that. Look, my general feeling is like everyone's trying to do the best they can, and everyone's doing pretty well. I think that when we started this company, and this was in 2019, it wasn't that long ago, almost nobody would take my call, and people just thought it was BS, and it clearly wasn't, and we had a lot of conviction in that. And within 2 years, it sort of became the topic du jour, and then I think since then has become very much understood to be very useful and also inherently a standard of care. So I think it's only the beginning of that journey, not the end. We think a lot about the input and the output layers of enterprises, meaning like what needs to go in to the machine to make it work, and then how do you then get information out in a way that is insightful, helpful, organized, and efficient. And that's where a lot of our work is going, on that input-output layer sort of component as well. But on the pure modality side, we have a lot of really exciting stuff coming in 3D that should be fun.
Awesome. Well, thank you very much. This has probably been one of my most engaging conversations to date, so I'm really excited to share this with everyone. I normally put a little question out to the audience, but this time I'm just going to give something, a bit of homework. I want everyone to look at everything they're doing in their landscape, reflect on what it looked like 10 years ago, and have a think, actually, how slow are we really going, and what aren't you giving yourself credit for? So Ophir, thank you for joining me in a very noisy London at the end, but it was a really great conversation, and can't wait to see your talk in a minute.
Awesome. Thanks so much.